And we are live.
Thank you, my patient viewers. Alexandra just hit the big blue, not red button, as we just found out. Welcome to my very first Boundary Community Office Hours. I'm excited because they've got all this brand new stuff that I get to learn about today. My co-host today is my lovely co-host is Rosemary. There we go. Sorry about the feedback. My co-host is Rosemary today. Rosemary, say hi.
Hello, everyone. You usually see me on the console and vault office hours and smattering of the other ones. So I'm happy to join in on the Boundary one today.
Nice. And then we also have Pete and the Jeffs, which is officially now a band name. So Pete and the Jeffs, can you all please introduce yourselves?
I'm Jeff Malnick, the engineering manager for the Boundary project.
I'm Pete Pacent. I'm the product manager for Boundary.
I'm Jeff Mitchell. I'm the technical lead for Boundary.
Now, before we go any further, if you have never read our code of conduct, I'm going to throw that into the chat for you all to review. You all know how I do this. I'll just do the TLDR. Treat somebody the way that you would want to be treated. Be welcoming, considerate, respectful. Be kind, and let's have fun. Ask us all the questions. Give us some hard stuff so I can pitch them at the team to see what they give us back, because I think that they're old hands with this by now. So I'm going to start off with the perfect question. What exactly is Boundary, and what have you all been focused on?
I can go ahead and field that one, and I'll share my screen. Since we're still a little bit new, I think it's always good to start off kind of office hours with just a quick 2-minute reprimer on anything Boundary, just for the any folks on the line that are new to Boundary. We can get into what we've kind of been focused on since releasing, but I think just as a primer, for anybody that doesn't know, Boundary is an identity-based access management product that's really going to be focused on managing access to dynamic cloud-borne infrastructure. If we think about HashiCorp's products as a whole, generally each one is focused on one of the various workflows in the cloud application delivery lifecycle. And with Boundary, what we're really focused on is securing human-based access to machines and infrastructure. Really, Boundary stemmed from a need that was initially identified with our Vault product. Whereas Vault is industry-leading solution for a couple of different things. First and foremost, secrets management. We had a bunch of users that were using Vault as kind of a centralized secret store for all of their secrets across their various infrastructure resources, and then wanted to take that a step further to really start to see, really start to monitor and manage access to that infrastructure with Vault. And we started hearing that a lot and said, okay, well, that's kind of outside of Vault's domain and wheelhouse, but there is this need to kind of take that Vault value proposition a step further and start to see, okay, how can we start to monitor and access to these infrastructure resources, virtual machines, containers, what have you, once beyond just like checking in and checking out that secret. And that's really where the need for Boundary came up. So with Boundary, what we're really looking to do is establish ways to securely, monitor and manage access to that infrastructure for your resources, regardless of what platform those reside on. I should also note that, while it initially stemmed as kind of a, value prop from Vault itself, there's no, requirements on Boundary to actually use Vault. In terms of the actual workflow within Boundary that we've been focused on enabling, the thing that we've kind of been calling this is our vision for ephemeral access. And with that, the idea is that users should be able to authenticate to Boundary with, whatever identity provider they use throughout their organization. That's something that we've been working on a lot since our initial release in October of last year. Then get a set of finely defined authorizations in terms of what an identity can do in terms of what systems it can connect to, what actions it can take against the systems, and then have a secure access model for actually connecting to that system, both at the actual network level within Boundary, but then also down the road in terms of being able to securely manage credentials for access to those systems. This is kind of our overall vision for the space that we can get into a little bit throughout today's office hours and down the road. We can talk about future features, but one thing that I think is new from yesterday is just our 0.15 release and a lot of, I guess, incremental releases that we've had since October. And for that, I think that Jeff has a little bit of an overview for our 0.15.
All right.
I don't know if we want
to.
Yeah.
What were those future features from yesterday, which I guess technically was the past?
Right.
Jeff Mitchell, do you want to review this or do you want me to go for it?
I think this was a classic case of which Jeff.
It was.
I sort of assumed that P was handing it off to you, and I guess he was handing it off to me. Sure, yeah, I can go through. Let me just, I got a lot of it in my head, but I don't want to miss some stuff. So just open up the changelog real quick. Yeah, okay, so this is actually our first release that requires a database migration. So we've built our migrations engine into Boundary. That's going to be a really important thing for a lot of stuff going forward, as you might imagine, because we'll need to add things to the database. So that's sort of it's user-facing in the sense you'll need to run a migrate, but it's sort of not user-facing in that it enables other features to come. So kind of some of the main things, there's now recursive listing, so you can start at the global scope or an org scope or whatever, and you can actually list elements down into further scopes. So if you say, I want to find all roles, then you can say, all right, I want to do a recursive list at the global scope, and I want to list do that listing on the role collection. Everywhere along the way, you're checked to make sure you actually have listing capabilities. So if you have the global scope and you have a couple of organizations and they each have projects and you have permission for listing on one organization and its projects and not on the other, then you only see results for what's down the tree. And in kind of a similar vein, you actually will no longer see in list entries, you'll no longer see resources that you have no permissions on. So if you're doing a list and you have no actions that you're allowed to perform on a resource at all, including read or list or whatever, then you simply don't get that return in your results. And also related to sort of permissions is when you are doing listing now and when you're doing reading on resources, then we actually return to you a list of the actions that you were authorized to perform against that resource. So I can show a demo of that in a bit, but basically this means that like whenever you are looking at a resource, you can find out like, what is it that I can do with this resource? And so if there's something that you think you should be able to do, but you can't, then you can, ask your administrator or go and adjust your role, the permissions that you have from your roles, et cetera, et cetera. So those are sort of all related to kind of understanding resources and kind of their layout and what you can do on those resources. Another big kind of item for this release, I would say kind of the other sort of biggest item is that you can now do worker filtering. This is something I'll demo in a little bit, but basically, or worker aware targets is the other way to put it. So what happens is when you have a worker config file, you can add a number of tags into it. So basically, these are key value. You can have multiple values for the same tag. For the same key, I should say. So you can add that into your configuration file, and then you can actually use them in a Boolean expression that's sort of embedded into the target definition. And then at runtime, when you're trying to decide like, okay, should traffic go here or should it go there? Then you can actually use those to control it. The filtering syntax, if you've used console and you're familiar with the filtering conventions there, the filtering syntax is very similar. I actually worked with the console team to essentially add another layer of kind of the syntax onto that expression library. And so because Boundary operates on exclusively JSON, then the selectors in that are not using custom syntax anymore. They're using JSON pointer, which is an RFC standard. But if you are using console as you were, then it will continue to work with the old syntax as well. So I will definitely be showing a demo of how that works. But why would you want to do this? Like, what's the point of this? The main point is that you might have workers that are allowing ingress to multiple different places, and you want to control what goes where for all sorts of reasons. So, for instance, if you have some workers that are running in GCP and some that are running in AWS and some that are running in Azure, then you probably don't want to have your traffic go into into one cloud and then go through some like back channel in the cloud, or have to go then out and into some other kind of ingress port in the other cloud. Number one, that's probably not even allowed for in your security domain, and number two, that's often very expensive compared to transit within a cloud. And so, what you can do is you can say, hey, this worker is actually in AWS, this worker is in Azure, this worker is in GCP, and you can say for this target. Then if you're accessing this target, then your traffic should only be handled by workers that are in, Azure. Um, and for this other target, it should only be handled by workers that are in GCP. And you can also do other things. So another reason to do that might be, you're heading up towards maintenance on some of the worker nodes, and you want to sort of drain sessions in advance. And you say, okay, my max lifetime for sessions is 24 hours. So what I'll do is I'll go, and I will. We don't support kind of re-upping the tags at runtime, but in the future, this is kind of one of the desired use cases. Is like you'll be able to say, "Hey, I've updated my tags and I've sent a SIG hub to the process, and so it will no longer advertise those tags." And so now what we can do is we can say, "Hey, once that traffic's drained, don't actually send any new traffic to it from these targets, because this is going to go down." Obviously, a dedicated maintenance mode would serve kind of a similar purpose, but it's just sort of an idea of the kinds of things that you can do with this. So again, I will definitely demo that in a little bit. Also, a bunch of different bug fixes as usual.
It's funny that someone in chat decided to ask if we have a diagram for study purposes, because my next question was going to be, how can people get started with Boundary, and are there any references?
There are. So we have an education team, and they've been building a lot of content on our Learn site, learn.hashicorp.com. We've also been, as we've been adding features, we've been updating our documentation. I think that it's pretty early, and I think that we know that there are sort of some gaps in the docs, as is often the case with a brand new project. And a lot of that is figuring out what's the right layout. How can people more easily discover what's there? In some cases, we get questions where the docs are there, but people can find them because it's the information is not where they thought it would be. So that's still kind of a work in progress. We definitely have some architecture diagrams, though. Jeff Malnick, I believe did you add those to the doc site, or are they part of the reference architecture, or both?
So we have a separate GitHub repo. I just put it into the chat here, but if you go to HashiCorp/boundary reference architecture on GitHub, that's all dashes between boundary reference architecture. You can get different types of deployment examples for everything from AWS to running boundary on Cube. There's also an example getting started with just Docker Compose as well. So varying levels of complexity there, but it's a really good place to go and get up-to-date examples of how to run Boundary.
Yeah, and I guess on just the topic of diagrams for Boundary, I think that there's two really good places for those. One is, as Jeff Malnick just pointed out, at the reference architecture repo that he linked, there's a great diagram that kind of gives an overview of a production deployment architecture or topology of Boundary. Also, another really good diagram that we have is in our domain model documentation. We've actually got a diagram that's not necessarily Boundary's underlying architecture, but rather is a great view of the overall identity access management model within Boundary. So basically how resources are organized within Boundary at the scopes level, how a target is organized in terms of its underlying host sets and hosts, what host catalogs are like, and then just the concept of user management as well within Boundary. So having users, groups, and then associated roles which give them permissions or grants to access that infrastructure. So I can link that as well.
Awesome, because the same person is asking if you should share that. So that kind of helps. All right, let's see. What do we have next? Pete, where did you put that link?
I am not
I can-
signed into YouTube, so I'm gonna send
Oh,
that
no.
I can take care of it. I
over
got it.
Slack.
Yeah, just send it to me over Slack or in our doc, and I got you.
Yeah, of
Awesome. Thank you.
course.
All right, Tam, I'm sending that to you in chat right now. There you go. All right. Anybody else have any questions in chat before we keep going?
I have a question for Jeff Mitchell.
All right. What you got?
Just to verify, the Boolean expression library that you mentioned, is that Go BEXPR?
It is. It is
Okay.
that. So part of the work that we did for here, because we also have some other places that we're planning on using that within Boundary, and there are some other places within HashiCorp where that is planned to be used, which I won't spoil for anything else. So part of what we did there is we worked with the console team to allow you to define either use the current syntax or to make it compatible with JSON pointer, because everything that we're doing is JSON and our APIs. And so, I think that if you look on our documentation site, which I can link to, give me just a moment. But if you look on our documentation site, then our examples are all using a JSON pointer, but both actually work if you're used to the old style selectors.
Awesome.
We just thought that sort of at this point, going towards a an RFC standardized way of kind of reaching into JSON was a good idea.
So for 1 second, just going back to Tam's comment in the chat around the whole scopes and identity access management topology within Boundary, I also just sent over a link in Slack that Tracy or Rosemary can add to the actual feed. And that's a really good block breakdown of kind of the scopes model within Boundary that walks through that each one of our kind of resources within Boundary and how they're all organized in a way that I think is helps users really make sense of it within Boundary. So also highly recommend that as a read.
Awesome. All right. So I think we have one more question in the YouTube chat, and then we could probably go to demo. So let's see. Is there a template for .tf Splunk vertical app and Axe? Is the question in chat.
So we don't have examples for shipping logs to Splunk yet, though stay tuned for more on observability in the very near future. What you can do today is use your existing log aggregation tools, whether it's FluentD or Logstash, and grab the output from the Boundary server while it's running, and you can ship those logs that way. We are on our roadmap right now. We do have some really exciting stuff regarding observability that we're going to be working on over the course of the next year. It's a really deep roadmap when it comes to observability and Boundary for obvious reasons. Stay tuned for more on that soon.
Awesome. All right, Jeff Mitchell, you ready?
I am.
Take it away.
All right. So hopefully, every now and then recently, Zoom has done something really weird when I've shared my screen. I'm actually going to, before I do that, just to try to reduce possible, let me close my web browser and close everything else. It's some graphics GPU thing. Not sure what.
That's why.
Yeah, it's some recent Zoom update and some probably update with my graphics driver or something. But anyway, sometimes when I share my screen, everything starts going real slow, and then Zoom disconnects me. So let's hope that won't happen today. Okay. So are these fonts visible?
No, you might want to up those a little bit.
I want to kind of keep them. How is that?
Rosemary, how does it look over on your screen?
A little bit better, but we might have.
I'll probably have to do a lot of scrolling. I just need to have a bunch of windows open for reasons that will sort of become obvious as I do this demo. So let's go with that and see how things go. Is that good enough? Rosemary? All right.
I think it's good for now. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go with it.
So I have a controller that's running, and I'm going to show you what one of my workers looks like. So here you can see I have some tags, and and so this is what's new. So I have region and cloud, and I have 1, 2, and 3. So here you can see this is US East 1 on AWS. This is US West 1 on AWS. And then on 3, I have US Central 1A on AWS. That was meant to be GCP. I'm going to go change that because that was meant to be GCP. That's not an AWS region. That's a GCP region. Cool. All right. So I have 3 workers that I'm about to start. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Okay, so now I have 3 workers connected to the controller. So you can see basically 2 are in AWS in different regions. 1 is in GCP. Now 1 is in GCP in the Central 1A region. Is this viewable for the moment?
Jeff,
Okay,
could you increase it just a little bit more?
Yeah. What's going to be important is going to be less what it is on here and more which one is doing something, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's better.
Okay. All right. But on the bottom right, this is viewable, right? On the bottom right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You might have the Zoom watermark in the way. So if any of the, the right bound might be.
I can, if the Zoom watermark is in the bottom right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. That better?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So here is my, here's my target, and there's no worker filter there yet. And so, by the way, this is the authorized action. So you can see I can do these actions on this target. So when I did a read on the target, showing me what I'm allowed to do. This is plumbed throughout every single resource now, and it shows up in listing as well. When you're listing resources, you can see the available actions on them. Okay, so what I'm going to do for demo purposes is, sorry, I don't remember the name of the thing. So there. All right. So I'm going to do a connect, and we're just going to watch. It's going to be like 1, 2, or 3. So that was number 1 up at the top left. That's where I saw a bunch of stuff happen. Number 1 again. There's number 3. So you can see it's doing like a randomized set of workers that my proxy is connected to. There's number 2. Okay, so I've hit all of them. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to update it. I'm going to say here's a simple worker filter, which do the font here. Now it's at least all one line. So here's a worker filter. I'm saying I just want to filter on name. So name is pulled in as well as the tags, but I'll just say name is W1. So that's worker 1. So now whenever I connect, it's always going to be the one on the top left, which is number 1. You can see like a bunch of text fly by over there, right? So I basically said, okay, I only want stuff to go through worker 1 at this point. And like this is what I was saying, it's more important to see where stuff is happening than it is like an actual thing. One thing I realized is that the workers are not very chatty in terms of when they get a connection in, except in trace mode, and they're very chatty. So I'll probably move some of these to debug after this demo. So that's a little bit easier to see. All right, so now I'm going to do something different. We're going to say, and by the way, you can do things like, you can do matches. So this would be a regular expression. So I can say 1, 3. So now I'll see stuff sometimes on number 1 at the top left, sometimes number 3 at the top right, just like that. So you can do regexes as well. And now what I'll do is I'll do a grouping. So I'll say AWS in, sorry. I don't like to use like keyboard shortcuts to go around stuff when I'm demoing, because I know I'm going to do something and like catastrophically get it wrong. Like I'd rather hit arrow keys than like delete words at a time and like get rid of my entire command line that way. Okay, so now I'm going to say AWS in tags region. So now it should be 1 and 2 because number 3 is in GCP. Oops, the workers have been all filtered. Did I not do that right? Oops, I'm in tags cloud. So yes, in that case, all the workers were filtered out. So now you see, it is possible to filter out all your workers. You'll get an error when you try to connect. I meant tags cloud, not region. There we go. So now it was top left, number 1, and there was number 2. And if I did this a bunch of times, I will still never hit number 3 because it's in the wrong one. So I could do the same thing. I could say, okay, now I just want it to be GCP, and it'll hit the top right because that's the one that's marked for GCP. And there we go. So basically, I went too fast. So that is basically it. Like I said, I'm just showing like you can write these Boolean expressions. They support grouping and comparisons and regular expression matching and testing for set what's the word? When you check, is it in the set for set, failing. Anyways, the point is you can do an in operation and it does work. So the other thing, if people want, I can shut this down and I can show recursive listing if that's of interest. Should I do that real quick while I have the mic?
I think even before doing that, just we can pause for a second to see if there's any questions.
I closed YouTube to try to hopefully have this work better. So I'm not sure what questions are there. So.
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
In the file that you, at least with the target tags, right? Right now, do I have to go in and declare the types of tags that I want to that are on the worker? Is there some way that I would be able to synchronize, let's say, AWS tagging to that configuration?
Yep. So we have, you could, I mean, I think that would come down to things like, some kind of template engine or Cloud Init. So it's built in a compatible way. We actually did something specifically for that use case. So I'll actually, let me show something else here. So it is equivalent. So this is, because it's JSON is what we reach into, JSON pointer. Because HCL is JSON compatible, I'm doing this in kind of normal HCL fashion. However, what we do also allow is you can do the following. So you can do it in this format as well, which it corresponds more to some of the other like cloud vendors, and that will work. So you can basically say, I just want to do key equals value. You can repeat keys here. So you could say like, this is also magically, I'm not sure how, but this is also Azure. So you could do that as well. And that is perfectly valid. So I'll just cat that again. So the one I actually changed. So yeah, but that is another way to do it. So basically, you can certainly, the idea is that you will probably want to put in tags that are coming from some cloud or another. One thing I'll caution, and this will change in 0.16, one thing I'll caution is that if you do a match where a tag is being looked for that doesn't exist, it will actually error out right now, as opposed to simply saying, that worker doesn't match. One way you can avoid that is if you have like ors or ands and you do it in a certain order that excludes ones that don't have that tag first, then that will still work. But if you just say like, okay, I want to have an arbitrary, if I went in here and I said, why is it highlighting Azure? That's so weird. I don't know. If I said foo equals bar, if I did that, where only that one had it, and I'll just restart that worker. And this is just a warning. As I said, this will go away in 0.16. This will just result in that worker not getting. But if I say now as a filter, foo, equals bar, what's going to happen is it's not going to work because it's going to go through the other ones and say, the key foo doesn't exist. So again, 0.16 that will work. That'll certainly make it easier once that change is made to go sort of cross cloud where they will have different tags. So I don't know when 0.16 will come out, but hopefully we had all the holiday shutdowns and everything for between 0.14 and 0.15. So I'm hoping that 0.16 will be a little bit faster.
I think Rosemary is probably going to have another question because she's been churning. I can see the brain. But before she does that, Pete, I know you all are still new.
I'll stop sharing this for the moment just to
no
get
worries.
all the faces on.
Oh no, not my face. What's the plan for like the normal release cadence? Or the anticipated normal release cadence going forward?
Sure. So at least initially within Boundary, we're basically releasing as soon as new features are available and don't, follow a well, defined pattern of release cadence, just because we are an early project right now. And I don't think that we want, since we don't have like, as large of a production user base as something like Terraform or Vault does yet, I don't think we want to be handcuffed to a set schedule for, to release on if we have something where something's ready to go and we can just, release as quickly as possible to make sure that we're making these improvements as fast as we can get them in the hands of our users.
Gotcha. And also people out there who know me know I'm going to say documentation counts. So
Right.
please throw in some documentation PRs if you have any idea.
Definitely. And actually, I think those for the worker filtering functionality that Jeff just ran through, there's a whole set of docs that I think are either live or going to be live.
They're live now.
Today.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're already.
Yeah, so we added a filtering section and concepts, and then we have information about this feature as one of the subtopics there, and as well as some examples.
Yeah, awesome. I'm glad that those are already live. I think before going into the recursive listing, one thing that I would just say about the worker filtering that I do think is really cool about this project, by virtue of us being open source and kind of taking feedback from the community, worker filtering was something that wasn't, initially as highly prioritized in our roadmap, where we were going to deliver it, by February or late January of this year. But based off of feedback from the community, particularly around meeting needs, either around latency or security concerns around not having, all workers peered to whatever networks targets may be deployed to, we wanted to add this feature to really hit those use cases. And I think that's just an example of kind of listening to feedback that came in from our users, either on our GitHub issues page or on our Discuss forum, and taking that in and bumping the priority of the feature. So now I think that the two main use cases for this worker filtering functionality are like, if I'm, based in the Western United States, I can now tag my, target to route traffic through a worker that's deployed, near my location, so that if workers are deployed in multiple different domains, I'm not just, randomly having a connection that goes through like Eastern Europe to access my target that's also in the Western United States. So I think latency is a big use case for that one. And also, if you've got targets spread out through multiple different private networks or PCI enclaves, worker filtering can allow targets to route through traffic that's to ensure that you're only peering enough workers that you need to a particular target location that you're trying to access in the event of any kind of security or data sensitivity.
I'm letting Rosemary ask another question because my dog decided to come in and bug me right now. So I'll leave that to Rosemary really quick.
Before Jeff goes to recursive filtering, I want to know, are all of you wearing boundary shirts? No.
I believe Jeff is not wearing a boundary shirt. It looks like a heather gray. These boundary shirts are very short in supply. There's only black ones right now.
This is actually a HashiCorp bomber jacket.
Oh, there we go.
But I'm not actually wearing, I'm actually wearing a HashiCorp shirt underneath, but not the boundary one. I'm sorry. I should have. I don't know why I didn't think about it. It should have been a mandatory part of the uniform. But you wouldn't see it anyways, because honestly, it's cold down here.
It's like how much HashiCorp swag can we find as like Easter eggs in our backgrounds?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that's something we should probably start doing on office hours. All right. Recursive filtering or Kubernetes? I leave your choice.
that was for those watching, the what Pete was just showing off there was there's a tradition of some kind of
my condo.
Yeah, there's a tradition of some kind of like winter gift when we've had our kind of traditional holiday shutdown, so it's been a beanie one year and a fleece another year and so on. But this last year it was a nice little, yes, Tracy's showing hers off too. It is a nice little oh no, that's not the Tracy. Was that the was that a fleece or is that a? Oh no, that's the blanket. Okay, yes. For those of us in the Northeast, it does get cold, so it's very much appreciated. All right, cool. I'll share my screen again. And this is easy. I just started up a dev instance just to honestly, because that way, if I want to hop around between scopes and all that, I have that. I don't have to like copy and paste from the doc where I wrote them down. I can just I know exactly what they are. I can do the fun boundary slide. For those who don't know the lingo, the boundary slide is when when you're working with dev and you start at 1, you just slide all the way to 0. This was someone on Twitter picked up on this like a day after we released, and they were completely correct. We did in fact pick it specifically for that reason, because it was 10 digit or 10 alphanumeric digit values for identifiers. And so originally there was a discussion about like, should we have like 10 zeros or this? And I was like, having to count 10 zeros as you type them is not tenable. Whereas it's very easy to slide down the keys of your laptop. Now, if you have a mechanical keyboard, then you have to watch out because you can pop keycaps off. I've definitely not done that ever. But if you're careful, then you can just well, not that because I wasn't being careful, but you can slide right down. It's very fast. So anyways, the boundary slide. Now those watching have a bit of an inside, little bit of inside lingo.
So if we're going down random anecdotes, when we were originally thinking about the like default syntax for these default targets, Jeff kind of pitched this vision of having a slide, and couldn't everybody use that easily, and isn't that ergonomic? And I think the tweet that came out that noticed that the day after launch was like, oh, it gives me such joy thinking of all these boundary users scattered throughout the world, just sliding their fingers across the keyboard and having an easy, way to access default resources. And I was like, I'm pretty sure this is exactly the nerd vision that Jeff pitched to the team when selecting that suffix it's pre-launch.
Yeah, it's something like, it gives me great joy to think of all these people trying out Boundary for the first time, sitting with a cup of coffee somewhere, and hearing the exact same set of 10 keys being slid across. That was a really fun tweet. If someone can dig it up, we could post it in the YouTube chat. Anyways, dig it up. I will try to actually get through this demo real quick. It's gonna be quick. It's exactly what we've told you that it is. So be prepared to be potentially underwhelmed, but possibly not overwhelmed. But hopefully you'll be whelmed, sufficiently whelmed. So boundary list or boundary scopes list. So that it defaults to global. So hey, look, we have an org. Boundary scopes list. Recursive. Hey, look, we have an org and a project. Cool, right? Okay, but we can do boundary roles list. You can see it right there, authorized actions. So like I can read, update, and delete on those. And so I can do boundary roles list, and I can say I just want to start at there. There's the slide. And so you can see within so you can see within that org there are these two roles. I guess we don't have a role. I thought we had roles in. I guess we don't have a role in the default project. But anyway, so or I can do that at the. Oh, I know why it did. So here's what happened. It did it at the. I forgot to actually type scope ID, so it did it at global, and then it ignored that. That's better. There we go. Okay, so I was like, that doesn't. She feels like it should have 3, not 2. There we go. So so this was a role created for the administration of that scope. This was created for login capability and account for that scope, and this was created for administration of the scope underneath it. So if I now did that properly with the scope ID, I said recursive. So it literally because I didn't do it then before, then it basically did that list, and I don't know what happened. Anyway. So now we can see even more because there should be 2 more because we're doing it at the global scope and it's recursive. And again, you can see everywhere like, authorized actions has been plumbed entirely through everything. So you can see everywhere along the way what it is you're allowed to do, which is also really nice, like because the CLI matches and the actual, if you're using like curl, matches those action names, then it's a nice, easy way to remember what it is that you can do. So, just as an example, so boundary roles, add grants, right, is the thing, and I'll do role ID. I'm just going to do that because I don't need this ID, role ID. You'd think I would know at some point. Okay, so I'm not going to do. I have to come up with the grant string. Okay. I can do that. Okay, so it's okay. That not found. That's actually what I wanted because the whole point of all this was that because it's an error. You know what? This is me just being lazy, and it's making for like a really terrible demo. So I apologize for that. Let me stop being lazy and let me put an actual role ID in. So now what's been happening is my own failure has led me to build up an actual valid thing. Okay, so that was my point. So we have this output curl string. We actually fixed a bug in that where if you didn't specify the version before, it would show you the curl to get the version instead of the final thing. So we fixed that in 0.15. So the point being, with custom, you can see right here, roles, you can see that it's a custom action, add grants. And my point was simply the symmetry between add grants here, in the CLI, add grants if you're doing it in the actual API, and here in authorized actions. So the nice thing about authorized action, one of the nice things is that it makes it very easy to figure out oh, if I want to set principles, what do? It's going to be set principles, right? If I want to remove grants, what do? It's going to be remove grants. So that my laziness cost me a good demo. That's okay. I think we've hit on the authorized actions of recursive listing, and I will stop sharing my screen.
I love that, actually. It's because it's now I can actually see what I can do and can't do, right? And that was, out of curiosity, is that output in YAML or
No.
some other?
No,
okay.
it's not. I guess because YAML is white space limited, I guess it sort of looks like YAML. I guess technically we could output in YAML, but we don't. No, it's just a format that so this is called table format. But unlike some of the other tools, we looked at Vault. Vault has data that is not necessarily kind of easily categorized, because for things like key value, it can be anything that you want. But here we know all the information that's going to come out. So it allowed us to build sort of a tabular style output, but that can use indentation to good effect. We haven't really been asked for YAML output, although technically it's something that could be done. But we do have format JSON. So you can get anything in JSON format. You can pipe that into JQ. So there's the output of add grants. So this is the raw output that we then generate the table from. So here's the role information, right? And principal IDs, principals, grant strings, grants. Here's the authorized actions on that, etc. So
awesome.
So yeah.
Okay.
Oh wait, I didn't share my screen, did I?
I'm sitting here, and the reason, it's good. It's good that there we go.
And the nice thing is that no one said anything, and Rosemary's yeah, okay. And no one actually
I was going to be
anything.
was he going to share something? Actually,
I forgot that I stopped.
I could actually ask the question that I was going to ask, which is similar, but this, could you export this, right, and use it for some kind of auditing or some kind of, I don't know, even Sentinel against it or something?
Well, so this is output. I think we have some plans for Sentinel, but I won't go into that yet. But no, this is what I was saying above about, so all this stuff, actually this is a list. Just update this because otherwise it'll be duplicate. I'll get rid of the format JSON. So this is the normal output. So you see canonical grants and principles, authorized actions, scope, etc., role information. But all of that was generated from the API output. The API output is this, right? And we're actually going to, for what it's worth, we're going to change the JSON format of the API output a little bit. This should be in time for 0.2 when that comes out. And I think we'll have a couple of other minor sort of tweaks in 0.2 that are breaking, but not badly. But the reason is so that when we have things like errors, or if we have things like, what's a good example of this? There are certain things we want to be able to return. So for instance, if you have a telemetry, so we're going to eventually add telemetry, and you want to expose things like trace IDs, we'd rather expose that, rather than try to embed it into this resource that came back, what we'd rather actually do is put this resource one level down, and then be able to put other metadata at the top level. So we could add things like a trace ID, the status code for the HTTP response, things like that, and then put all of this one level down under the item. And so that way you can get that same information in when you do format JSON. And I think we've talked about it a lot on the team, and we think that's the right thing to do, rather than try to like essentially slot it in somewhere in this resource, because we could do that technically. We could sort of have like an underscore sort of key slotted in, but I think that the downside to doing that is then you are portraying something as a resource and you have a lot of information that's coming back that's not actually a part of the resource, and we don't really like to have user confusion whenever possible. There are plenty of tricky things to understand in Boundary. We don't need to add to it. So that's a change that will probably come in 0.020.
Thanks. I'm going to wait on that one. Rosemary's already answered one of the questions in chat. Rob might have some questions in the chat. So yeah, Rob, what questions do you have, Pete and the Jeffs? I really like. I think I'm growing to like that, by the way, for like a T-shirt. Rosemary, did you have any more questions?
In the meantime, we had another question, which is, there are a couple ways that users can log into Boundary. Is there a way for users to log in with their identity provider of choice? Is there an auth protocol that we're going to first see in Boundary?
Let's kick that one over to Pete Pacent.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of field that one. So when Boundary was initially released and up to yesterday's 0.15 release, we obviously support a local concept of identity with a username and password auth. Like I had kind of talked about in the beginning, our ultimate vision is that we want to be able to allow users to authenticate with whatever identity provider their organization might use throughout all of their apps. The first auth method that will support, or additional auth protocol that we'll support on that front, is OpenID Connect, OIDC, because we kind of see that as the auth protocol that the most, or I guess it's utilitarian in the sense that it's the greatest number of identity providers used by our users implement OIDC, whether that's Okta, Azure AD, what have you. And that's going to be something that's actively being worked on within Boundary. And first rule of product management is don't give dates for that one, but one forecast that I would give is within the next, not knowing the cadence of these community office hours, either the next one or the one after, we might be talking about OIDC much more in depth for those, as a little spoiler alert.
Awesome.
All right, let's see. I'm actually going to do a pass off on this one. So for those of you that don't know, but actually read the description for today's office hours, and I feel like we have a really good HashiCorp Live somewhere within this group, because I have thoroughly enjoyed today. So I'm going to bounce over to Rosemary to ask that question.
Yeah, so we were supposed to have something Kubernetes related. To be determined. We'll probably have more in the future, as Tracy pointed out. But I guess a commonly asked question is, can Boundary be deployed on Kubernetes, and what are the integrations that the team has put in to support Kubernetes login, for example, or authentication? Sorry, not login.
Pete, do you want me to take this?
I was going to say, as our Kubernetes wizard on staff, please do so, Malnick.
Awesome. Rosemary, that's a great question. So our latest reference architecture repo is actually updated with an example of running Boundary on Kube and how to access a workload through that instance of Boundary running on Kube. So in the actual reference architecture, it walks you through, I think, in 5 steps, just setting up Minikube locally. It uses Terraform to actually provision Kubernetes itself, get the Boundary deployment running, gets a Postgres DB running, initializes the Boundary database, and then starts a Redis instance. And it shows you how to actually connect to that Boundary server, and then obviously connect to the Redis instance running on Kube. So there's a really good example there to get you started with, just the YAML hacking that needs to happen to get Boundary running on Kube, and some of the methodologies we would use here within HashiCorp to actually provision the database and kind of initialize stuff from the get-go. Along with that, we've actually added a Kube Connect subcommand, so you can now do Boundary Connect Kube. And what that command does is it actually forces you through the boundary proxy for accessing the Kube API server. So what this means is if you have boundary running externally from your Kubernetes instance, and you want an easy way to actually access the Kube API, i.e. run kubectl commands, you can now do that through the boundary CLI as boundary connect kube. So really cool stuff there. Allows you to both, get up and running with boundary running on Kube, as well as accessing the Kube API server via boundary.
Awesome. And since we're almost out of time, the last question I'm going to ask before I close this out, Rob did promise, he gave us a question. So, and I quote, Pete, can you give us a high level workflow of how OIDC works, please?
I'm not sure whether that's the OIDC auth method within Boundary or the OIDC protocol as a whole. In terms of how it's going to work for Boundary, just the idea like other client apps or other apps that use an OIDC provider, users would be given the option to like, once an OIDC auth method would be onboarded to a scope within Boundary, you'd be able to log in with that onboarded identity provider. So like, log in with Google or log in with Okta. Boundary would basically redirect your login to that OIDC provider's authorization endpoint, where that IDP would then be responsible for both authenticating that user as well as minting a JSON web token or JOT that contains a set of claims around that identity in question that it would send back to Boundary once successfully authenticated. And Boundary could basically build that user profile based off of the fields contained within that JOT.
Nice. Ooh, that was perfect timing. So we've got about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to close this out. I have thoroughly, when I say thoroughly, I absolutely mean thoroughly enjoyed you all. I might not give you all back to Rob. That shall be determined. Next week, we will have another office hours, same time, same place. However, it will be Vault focused. Well, it will be a Vault office hours and it will be Raft focused. So I'm actually going to tune into that one. So everybody come join us.
You're not going to have us back every week?
I would if I could, but then the other tools will get jealous and how.
All right. Well.
It will be at 8:30 Pacific, 16:30 GMT. If you want to keep up with us, you can go to hashicorp.com/community/office hours. I'm throwing that in the chat. And also for those of you interested in Terraform modules, I will have a HashiCorp Live this Friday on Twitch, speaking with the product delivery team about Terraform modules. So that should be fun because that's something I'm trying to get better at myself. Rosemary, you got anything?
No, if you have any continued questions, always post on community office hours and find us on Twitch. And the Jeffs, Pete and the Jeffs, the band, are always around on GitHub, Discuss, etc. So definitely check out Boundary.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to say thank you and goodbye. Everybody want to say bye or wave bye?
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Bye.